We're going to do this as a conversation and let Tommye tell us some things here. Appreciate your doing this, Tommye. Why don't you stand up and show yourself off here?
Will you describe what I'm wearing then?
Okay, I'm about to describe it. Tommye, what are you wearing?
This is my great-great-grandmother's dress. And it's over 100 years old. How it got preserved is almost unreal, but it's the real thing. And since we're all ladies and gentlemen, the petticoat is even nicer than the dress.
Oh, yes.
And just to make it a little more realistic, like one of the pictures where my great-grandmother's wearing it, well, we added a little shawl to match her shawl.
There you go.
So the dress is an original and the shawl is added.
It was added, right?
Is it antique?
No.
Okay. Well, Tommye, where were you born?
Ada, Oklahoma.
Really?
What's your full name and why is it Tommye?
Dang, little boy.
Very simple. My dad's name was Tom. My mother was Clara, so my middle name is Clarine.
Tommye Clarine.
Parker.
Who were your parents?
Tom Parker and Clara Parker.
Maybe you better hold that.
Are you getting shaky? No, Tom Parker and Clara Parker.
Hold it closer to your mouth so it'll amplify a little. Where was your father born?
He was born in the foothills of the mountains near Ardmore, Oklahoma. If any of you been to Turner Falls, Oklahoma, and beautiful part.
And what kind of work did he do?
Well, he worked for the Oklahoma Gas and Electric until the Depression, and like everybody else, there was no work. And he'd been raised on a farm and a ranch, so he became a ranch manager.
Now tell us a little bit about your mom.
Oh, I could talk all day.
And we'll talk about her some more, but where was she born?
My mom was born on Tucker Cemetery Road, and if you know where the new the gas company, Benny Magnus, has that building. Well, Benny Magnus's building, the corner of it, sits right over in the front yard of where my grandmother's house was.
Now you've brought a sample with you, or with us, of a quilt. Can you
Right.
talk about that a little bit for us?
Yes, my great-great-grandmother brought that from, let me see, that would have come from northern Georgia in about the 1860 area. And it was called, let me make sure I've got it right here. One pattern was the hickory leaf. And then there was more research done, and a second name of the quilt, which I like better, was Order Number 11. And the story behind that is there was the marauders during the Civil War came through, and this little girl saw the marauders snatch her mother's favorite quilt and take it away. So she tried really hard to remember the design, and that's how close she came up to it. Now, we gave that to the museum when it was over at Gassville, and when Jane was over there with the museum. And it's written up as it's a piece of a quilt, but actually if you take the back off and open it up, it's the whole quilt. And it came on the wagon train that your bed came on.
Wow.
Well, tell us about your great-grandmother.
My great-grandmother would be Louisa Catherine Coffey Wilkie. And she lived there. I'm not sure if just where she was born, but my grandmother was born in the house, the yard where she's standing. My mother was also born there.
The house on Tucker
On
Road.
Tucker Cemetery Road. And, but she died in 1926, so my mother knew her well. They all lived together. Actually, it was great-grandma's house in the beginning. And
your great-grandma came on in the wagon train, right?
she
From Georgia.
came on the wagon train from Georgia. The way I've gathered is that her husband was here first, and he liked it so well, he sent word for the son and the Wilkie family and the Leonard family to all gather up and come to Arkansas.
When that wagon train came, about how many people and families were involved in it?
Well, according to the history books that came out of the Historical Society, about 21 families came.
And on the right there,
That is Mr. Hiram A. Wilkie, great-great-grandfather. And we don't have any of his clothes.
didn't take good. How did he and your great-grandma meet? Did they know each other in Georgia? Or did they meet after she came out here?
Oh, they met in Georgia. Going back to the Coffeys, the best we've been able to determine, I think there's people here know maybe more about it than I do even, but back in the 1680, 1690, there was an uprising in Ireland, and County Cork, Ireland. And there were a lot of Coffeys there, and with the Protestants and the Catholics having a war there, I'm not sure which side they were on, but they had problems, and so they finally had to leave there, and the Coffeys came to Virginia, and they formed in Essex County, Virginia for quite a while. And then they migrated then for some reason to South Carolina. And then they heard that there were lands available up in northern Georgia. So they put in a bid to get land there that the Indians were giving up. And they moved to Georgia. And when they got to Georgia, the way I understand it, they met the Leonard family and the Wilkies there. They were all neighbors, and they went to church together. And so when Colonel Coffey sent word to come to Arkansas, they all came.
I've read there's a famous Colonel John Coffey that was involved in the War of 1812. Is your family connected to him that you know of?
There is a Colonel John Coffey, and
He was a friend of Andrew Jackson.
I don't know, but he followed, some of the coffees went into Kentucky with Daniel Boone, and so could be.
Now, we'll show the next picture here, and you tell us about that.
Well, that is my grandmother, Florence Wilkie Whitaker. And grandmother had 6 daughters and 1 son, and those are the 6 daughters. Got them all together one time. My mother is in the dark dress with the little white scarf hanging down. And the story goes that she had just found out she was pregnant with me, so I'm there.
So you're in the picture. That's good.
Right, and the odd thing when you start checking into all of these families, there were very few boys. My grandmother had 6 girls. The Coffey family had, the James Coffey family had 7 girls, and the Wilkies had, I believe, 7 girls. Anyway, you add them all up, the 3 families, there's about 17 girls and 4 boys.
Wow.
And there's another odd thing that runs through like a thread. You wouldn't think much about Texas. In that time of the year, Texas wasn't famous. And every family had a girl named Texas. And I thought that was odd. And I don't have no idea where it came from.
The background, is that the house you lived in, or?
That is my Aunt Lula. She would be on the back, second from the left with an add-on. And that's in Ada, Oklahoma. And grandmother had come to visit. There were not many pictures made unless it was special occasion.
Yeah. Now, not meaning to pry, but you said that the story in the family is that your mother was pregnant at that time. So about when was that picture taken?
Oh, your tongue.
Can you subtract? Really?
Well, I don't know your age, so.
Well, I'll be 88, my birthday.
Wow.
And that would have been,
Ada, Oklahoma in 88.
that would have been 1931.
Okay.
That's when that was made.
Well, let's look on a little more at your family here. Tell us about this picture.
Well, I've never met either of them, but the lady on the left is Eldora Wilkie Denton, and she married S.E. Denton, who is the son of the Dentons at Denton Ferry Road. And then, of course, that's great-grandma, and she's got my dress on.
Yeah, what's she doing with your dress? And where would that picture have been taken?
It would have been Arkansas, but I have no idea. No idea where it was made. It was just identified as that.
Have you got a story to share with us about your great-grandma?
About my
We know she came on the covered wagons, and on the wagon train, but is there a family story about her?
I don't really know.
Okay.
My mother, of course, she died in 1926, so Mom would have been 16. And about all I really know is I gather she pretty much ruled the household.
Okay. Strong woman.
Strong woman. I was looking through notes on this to see. I ran across something that was interesting. You all were speaking about the Mountain Home Cemetery and getting your grave. Gassville has a very good directory, and I have been able to find most all of these people over in the Gassville Cemetery. And when you go back to the Wilkie family, I found a lot of sadness. They had a large family, but they had a son, James, only lived 2 years, 6 months. They had a son, Glenn, lived 8 months, 19 days. And they had a daughter, Texas, who lived 4 months. And then in addition, but imagine losing those children like that. And then they had Aunt Ada Wilkie, lived to be 63. And then they had 2 sets of twin girls. My grandmother Florence is a twin, and her sister is Lula. And then they had a second set of twin girls named Maud and Myrtle. And some of you, I don't know if anyone's old enough or not, but Myrtle married William Brown, and they're buried over at Gassville. And they had a son, Linton Brown, that married Gladys Shoemaker. So these may be names you're familiar with.
Let's talk about those twins a little bit. Tell us a little more about them there. There they
Okay, that's my great Aunt Lula, and I didn't know her well as I did some. She married a man from this area, John Copeland, if you know any Copelands. And
are. Didn't you tell me this picture was taken on their birthday?
that was on their 81st birthday, and it was in Oklahoma City. My grandmother Florence had come over for that. They had not spent a birthday together in 35 years.
Is that right?
But my Aunt Lula married John Copeland, and they moved to Oklahoma. And I really didn't, I just saw her on special times.
Well, that would have been a special day for them
That was
after all those
special,
years.
right.
Well, here's another picture involving the twins.
Oh, yes, here we are. That's Maud and Myrtle Wilkie on the left. Aunt Maud married in Gassville, and her husband was I.N. Covington, I.N. initial. And there was his garage building over at Gassville. I don't know what year it was torn down, but I remember it well when I was a child. And it was a big stone rock building on the left side or south side of the highway. And it had in carved stone, I.N. Covington. And they are the Coventon Covingtons, because there's others that are Covington. And they lived here for quite some time, and then their 2 sons moved to Oklahoma, and they went to Oklahoma to be with them, and I knew them very well. I grew up around them, and they're buried in Ada. And Aunt Myrtle married Mr. Brown, as I always called him. And as I said, they only had 1 son, Linton Brown, and they're all buried in Gassville too. And then the lady in the center is Ada, and I always heard my mom talk about Aunt Ada, and she's buried in Gassville, but I never knew her. And then the next lady is my grandmother Florence, and you would never get her to leave Baxter County. There was no way. And the other one is my Aunt Lula, and she wound up in Oklahoma.
Now we'll go on here. Tell us a little bit about that picture.
Well, that is a real mixture. There's Wilkies and Whitakers, there's Copelands, there's Covingtons, and my great-great-grandmother is there in the black shadow, evidently got this same black dress on because you can't see her. And my mother is the little girl, there's two little girls, and my mother is on the left. And I've got the names of all of the people on the back of the picture, but it's quite a mix there.
Is your great-grandma Wilkie in that picture?
Yes, in the black.
You can't see her.
She's
Can't see her.
hidden
She's-
in the smudge.
She's in the shadows.
Yeah. Didn't your great-grandpa Wilkie have businesses in Gassville and Mountain Home?
He had a cotton gin in Gassville. Was the only business over there for years, according to what I've been able to find out. And then he, along with his father-in-law, Colonel Coffey, built the first old road from Gassville to Mountain Home. And he had a mercantile. So
In
he-
Mountain Home, wasn't it? The
Yes,
mercantile?
So he was kind of a busy man.
There was a toll road between Gassville and Mountain Home?
An old road.
She said
Oh,
old road.
The old,
Oh.
now, where it was in conjunction with the highway now, I don't know.
Probably wouldn't have been too different, I wouldn't
No,
imagine.
Where was the
I,
cotton gin?
in Gassville,
But
so
where, you don't know where in Gassville?
I know, I never knew that. And I haven't found anybody else. It'd be nice to know. And when you look at this group of people in the Wilkie family, I ran into a problem. I lost a person. In the Wilkie family, we went through the three children who all died so young. And then we've mentioned Aunt Ada, who lived to be 63. We had two sets of twin girls. We had Eldora that married a Denton. And my great-grandmother had a son named Lee Wilkie. And I have pictures that he's in. And years ago, when I started trying to find all these people, I can't find him. He's not on the register over at the Gassville Cemetery, so I'm hoping to come down to the society there and
Well,
see if we can find him.
It would be
Yeah.
fun if we could.
Yeah.
Most families have some challenge or other like that.
And I know he exists because Mary Ann Messick had him in her book with a really odd story. He was the only son with 6 daughters. And
So he was in that one picture that we looked at of the
Yes.
family. Yeah.
Yes, and according to my mother, her mother thought that the brother could do no wrong. All those 6 girls and only one brother. And so he was supposedly perfect.
Yeah, right.
But anyway,
So I guess we know what happened to him.
Mary Ann Messick told one of her famous stories. And it seems there were a group of young men, and all the last names are prominent names that are well known in this part of the country. They decided to peep in the Pentecostal church windows while church was going on and created a little disturbance. So they called the sheriff, and he came out, took them all in. Well, no one had ever heard that story or anything until I found it in Mary Ann's book. And my mother was thrilled to death. She said, if only Mama knew that Lee wasn't perfect.
Oh, I love it.
Now, here's another picture, talk about it a little bit.
That's my grandmother, and she had come to visit us again in Oklahoma. And in fact, when she came on that visit, I was pregnant with our only child.
Okay.
So there's something about these grandma pictures.
Now, when the wagon train came out of Georgia, there was the Coffey family and there was the Wilkie family and other families. One was kind of prominent, and it has to do with this last picture here.
Right. Everyone here knows is more about that than I do, but it's special to me because Georgia Leonard is our cousin. For me, it's about a third cousin probably. But anyway, my grandma, Florence Wilkie Whitaker, and Georgia lived there together in the 60s. Leon and I started coming on vacation probably in 1960, and we'd stay out on the lake, come in to visit my grandma and Georgia, and out under the big tree there, we would, so they'd have us a lunch ready, and we'd sit out there and eat lunch and visit, and just enjoy ourselves.
Well, I think it's remarkable and interesting that even though you are not a native of here, you were born in Oklahoma, right? But to see the deep family roots that you have associated with this place. And then, of course, I think most everybody here probably knows that the Leonard house is a house that was taken apart in about 1991 or 92, and the George Washington Jones cabin was discovered inside it. No, the Talbert cabin was discovered inside, excuse me.
The Talbot.
It was Sim Talbert's cabin. And in researching about Raps Barren over in the park, I did find out that Sim Talbert sold that to Mr. Leonard in about 1870.
Wow.
So,
I know when they started tearing down my grandmother's house about, it's probably been 5 to 7 years ago, and as they took all the framework off and everything, it was kind of like that. You got down to
found
it
logs
and
inside.
found logs where it had originally been logged.
What did your family do with those logs?
Well, we didn't own the property. It had been sold down through the ages, and our son had retired here, and he wanted to get his hands on one of those logs to make a mantle, but we didn't get it.
That would have been a nice heirloom.
Yes, it would have, very, very much.
Well, you said you and Leon came here in about the 1960s?
We started coming on vacation, but
At that time.
he was in the military. And we didn't come here till 1976.
Did you have a career of any kind?
I did.
Tell us about that.
I worked for the United States Air Force, and I was logistics manager for electronic warfare equipment. And
Did that have anything to do with you meeting Leon?
no, I met Leon when we were
Long-
about,
Long before that.
we were about 12 and
Oh, yeah.
13 years old.
In school?
Yes, different schools. He
Okay.
went to one, I went to another one.
Well, you overcame that obstacle, though.
The easy way we did it, during the war when you could send an airmail letter and, you know, it was a red, white, and blue
I do
envelope.
remember that.
Well, my community wasn't big enough to be called a town. My community was about 15 miles from the county seat where he lived. So he wanted to be sure that he got to see me one weekend, and he wrote me an airmail letter. But
That's pretty clever.
Leon and I have been married over 70 years now.
Fantastic.
And
Wow.
That's great.
it is, really. And he had a good career in the Air Force. When he retired, he had over 15,000 flying hours. And, but the best time has been here.
Did you have any difficulty getting him to move here?
No, we couldn't get here fast. Every year from 1960 on, we would come and we'd have to go back.
Well, it must have been great to come back where
Yeah.
your roots lie,
Yeah.
you know.
And we always said, oh, if we could just live here. And finally we do.
Fantastic.
Anything else you especially want to tell us here?
Well, I just want to say that Mary Ann Messick's book has been a really neat thing. And then the book that was put out, the most recent, I
In
think.
2003, the big
Yes.
brown book,
Uh-huh.
or red book,
That
some
is
people call
very
it.
good. Yeah, it's red.
Maroon.
And then the Gassville Cemetery has been really good in helping find all these things.
Let's let people ask you a few questions.
I might not have the answer, but they can.
I have a comment while that picture's up. That little outbuilding out back that was a smokehouse is where the lumber came from that we have. It was donated to the society a few years ago. The man tore down the smokehouse behind the old Leonard house. That's what you got to build picture frames out of the other day.
Oh.
Well, we were out there a lot of summers during the, it would have, I believe,
You could see the
I
corner of
think
the-
she died in, what, 72,
on
and
this.
my grandmother died in 67, so it was the early times. But, you know, the odd thing of it is with DNA being so good now, after I started finding all these connections, I discovered that we share, or I share, DNA with the Bodenheimers, the Leonards, the Tuckers, and Harold Tucker Auto Supply.
Mhm.
And then for years, I've worked with Shirley Tucker Pointer at the Christian Clinic. Our son and his wife go to church with Shirley. So here we are, generation after generation, and you find all the connections.
Baxter County family connections are really a treasure for all of us, you know,
Right.
because.
You know, they say don't talk about someone.
Talking about your cousin, that's
Right.
It's interesting to note, if you look at this picture, you see photo courtesy of Naomi Bodenhammer,
Right.
Kathy's mom,
Grandma.
grandmother,
Grandmother.
His, yeah.
your great grandmother. So
And I think
those are just the kinds of connections we enjoy around here.
his great-great-great-grandfather is my great-great-great-grandfather.
Yeah. Any other questions?
May I ask you a question?
Sure.
Some of our people went out to Oklahoma and moved out there, or they would go there and work. Was there industry out there?
Oil,
Oil?
oil and gas.
Okay.
Mhm.
And I'll add one more comment. In West Plains, we used to shop at Wilkies drugstore. I don't know if they're related or not, but that's an unusual name.
I don't know either for sure. I do know that they went, one of the Wilkies went up in Missouri and had a store there because he would ride the train from Cotter up in Missouri so he could take care of the business there.
The Whitaker, that was in your family, what, were they Oklahoma Whitakers or?
No,
Baxter
no,
County
they're
Whitakers?
Arkansas Whitakers.
They're-
Whitaker Lane, and you know, you go down to the meat company there. I don't know what, I don't know that much about the Whitakers, but they are, my grandmother's husband was definitely local.
Oscar
What was his
Whitaker.
first name?
What?
Do you know what his first name was?
Marion.
Marion Whitaker.
Mhm.
Well, Tommye, thank you so much for coming and telling us about this family history. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
And I'll bring my dress back and give it back to you.
She had already donated the dress to us, but I told her she needed to wear it when she talked to us tonight.
Gwen has a question.
I'm just interested because it's so old. Is it wool, is it cotton?
It's cotton. And the back, it was well worn. There are 2 big patches on the back. And so they made use of them that make them last a long time.
All right, that's it for tonight. Visit, go ahead, Gwen. Another question.
Did any of your coffee family have another farm that was out in the vicinity of Tucker Cemetery? I know down what is now Pet Haven Road, on the left, there was a place called the Old Coffee Place.
Well, probably so. I seem to find out that they maybe lived in 3 different locations. And there was the John Coffees, the James C. Coffee, and the James A. Coffees. So, could be. They were mainly in the Whiteville, Gassville, and Colfax.
There's a picture that my mother had of me as an infant, and she said, well, that was taken when we lived at the Old Coffee Place.
Probably was. Probably was.
All right, thank you so much.
Wow.